Mm-mm. My favorite president. I think, and the people that think this are typically not the ones that have a Twitter account or any kind of social media. So I think people are deeply disturbed and offended by these things, but they don't say it. They feel it, and it's not something because people like that typically don't share their thoughts a lot on the internet. And I think a lot of what we see on social media is not representative of what like what a lot of people think, because when you think about how many comments and how many people you can actually hear or listen to about each and every topic compared to how many people there actually are, we're talking like 100 million people that like live in how many? I think it's actually a lot more than that. I'm not up to date on my populations, but there's so many more people. I think you have to put that in perspective too. Is like a lot of what we see in the media, social media, it's not truly representative of um, what people actually think. That's my thoughts. Okay, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So, that's crazy. What happened to like just basic humanity? Can't touch my face. Well said. So I've seen too. The government, it could be a good thing, and I think there's this misconception that government control is like a bad thing, and it doesn't have to be. Private private company control. I don't know if I prefer that. But there's hmm, interesting. I'm actually curious about the actual is that been accomplished. It's fucking called up, man. Cop. Anymore. More light, eh? To Canada. That's interesting. I think that makes so much sense. I think there's politicians that want to make positive changes. There's, there's all these things stopping it. Okay. Yes. So true. Cameras. That's the way I like it. Everybody live streams. I'm just kidding. That's a good question. How do we settle things down? Just even within, like, party. I'm not gonna say I'm not. I'm a. I'm not a part of any party, but like, but how are they doing, right? guess finding like common ground, eh? True. That's what I'm saying. I wonder how much it would how much it would be. I feel like they restrict a lot of these things. Good. There's got to be like a pathway in order to get these things done. You got to create a way to accomplish it. Just curious here. I wonder if I can. Can I change my? I can share my screen. Oh fuck! Go back. How do I go back? okay. Fuck. I thought it. I thought it would. I thought it took the whole screen.
A particular time and place here in America, and
Right.
voters are not going to agree with us 100% on everything.
That's pretty cool.
And so it is not a sellout. It's not a betrayal to say that we're going to shape our agenda and our message in a way that allows us to build a working majority to get stuff done. And I think particularly around social issues, sometimes we get confused around this. You witness what happened in Minneapolis, and you say to yourself, morally speaking, that 5-year-old child who's standing in front of that SUV as his father's being dragged off, that child is equal to mine.
I don't know if it's like
or any child. His immigration status, his nationality, does not change.
I think it's just the YouTube channel.
The love and decency that we should be showing that child.
Okay.
But what is also true is that we're a nation of laws, we have borders, and we've got to figure out an immigration policy that is orderly and that is fair and is enforced in a sensible way that is compatible with our values, but may not fully capture the degree to which that kid should have the same chances in life as a U.S. citizen kid. But, we've got to accommodate the reality that the majority of the American people think that there's a difference between somebody who's a U.S. citizen and somebody who's not, and that they want an orderly immigration system. And sometimes I think what happens in the online debate is if somebody suggests, well, we have to have some immigration enforcement, then somebody's going to point at that child and say, well, so you don't care about that kid.
Yeah.
So you must be a bad person. The same would be true, let's say, here in Los Angeles around the homeless issue. I think morally, ethically speaking, it is an atrocity that in a country this wealthy, we have people just on the streets. And we should have we should insist on policies that recognize their full humanity, people who are houseless, and be able to provide them the help and resources that they need. But we should also recognize that the average person, doesn't want to have to navigate around a tent city in the middle of downtown. And that we're not going to be able to build a working majority and support for the resources that we need to help folks like that, whether it's drug treatment or temporary housing or what have you. We're not going to be able to generate support for it if we simply say, you know what, it's not their fault, and so they should be able to do whatever they want, because that's a losing political strategy. That doesn't mean that we care less about those folks. It means if we really care about them, then we got to try to figure out how do we gain majority support and be practical in terms of what we can get through at this moment in time and build on those victories. That a lot of times is the arguments that are taking place, but they become sort of performative, and people start saying, oh, you're selling out. Or conversely, I think sometimes folks at the center say, you're being impractical and dismissing legitimate critiques and concerns. And what we need to be able to do is to maintain both ideas at the same time, which is our long-term goals have to be driven by our values and our core beliefs and our ethics and our morals, in the sense that every person counts. And short-term, we got to win elections.
Right.
And anyway, the good news is, I think that the folks that we are fighting politically, the current White House, this administration, and their enablers, they're behaving so badly they're doing such crazy stuff that it shouldn't be hard for our side to coalesce around the areas where we agree on and focus on that. And I think that that is going to happen if we are effective in winning the midterms.
Find things.
If we then have a robust primary for who's going to be the next Democratic president, we shouldn't be afraid of having a robust debate. I want all
I feel like a healthy discussion
to sort this out. I benefited from having about as grueling a primary as I could have. It made me a better candidate. It ultimately made me a better president because I had been tested. My ideas had been tested. The story I was telling about America had been tested. And that's what we should be looking for, rather than expecting that somehow we're going to all come up with some consensus blueprint master plan that everybody's going to execute. Democrats aren't good at doing that anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think, one block of voters who I think there has been particular focus paid to right now is young voters. And, you were able to mobilize a generation of young voters in a way that hadn't been done before. I got involved in politics because of you. And in fact, a lot of millennials, folks my age, got involved in politics because of you. Like when I was a student, you could not find any other students on campus who were not supporting your campaign. Democrats and you had owned the cultural zeitgeist in a way that hadn't been done before, and frankly hasn't been done since. And we've seen a shift happen, obviously, from 2008, 2012 up to 2024.
Right.
And for the first time, we saw Democrats really lose their grip on culture in a way that hadn't happened before. And so what is your advice in terms of remobilizing a generation of Americans that we've had trouble mobilizing up to this point?
Well, look, part of it has to do with the fact that I was young.
Yeah.
And
maybe don't nominate octogenarians?
Look, I'm 64 now. I'm pretty healthy, 64. Feel great.
Yeah.
But the truth is, half of the references that my daughters make about social media, TikTok, etc., I don't know who they're talking about.
Yeah.
There is
the age now where
of at some point you
I'm
age
starting
out.
to
You're not connected
not understand
directly to the immediate struggles that folks are going through. And so I'm not making a hard and fast rule here, but I do think that Democrats do well.
I feel like I'm still young enough
when we have
still kind of
candidates who are plugged into the moment, to the zeitgeist, to the times, and the particular struggles that folks are
I think that was the cool thing
thinking about
Twitch,
as they look towards the future rather than look backward toward the past. And so some of it is choosing candidates who check that box.
It was a way to connect.
I do think that
for me,
there is an element of joy
help too.
That Democrats lost.
I remember, there was just I put a lot of effort. I didn't put a lot of effort. I put a lot of thought into it. I remember talking about religion and spirituality, and you want to ask questions. I remember one time I said, God is a concept that cannot be understood. I still believe that. You can't really fully understand the idea of a higher power with our current hardware, because you want to open up people's minds to make them think. And I think that's the key. Is just getting people to think.
Sometimes our campaign was fun. We had some look. It wasn't always fun for me, but we built a community. We gave people a sense that if you are part of this, you're doing something meaningful, and it wasn't just talk.
That's true.
Young people ran our campaigns. We empowered them. We put them in charge.
Yes,
they were out there figuring stuff out. I'm not the person who was figuring out our media strategy. I was not the person who was out there,
Give them the agency.
Knocking on doors and talking to voters and creating events. It was 20 and 30-year-olds. And so what happened in our campaign, and what you recently saw in Mondami's campaign in New York, when there's that sense of joy and engagement and involvement, then people feel like, all right, this is not just some transactional grind. This is me becoming part of a community and joining with others. And I think young people respond to that. And then a corollary to that is I do think that culturally, and I've talked about this before, we did turn off. I think there was a certain way of talking about issues for Democrats where we sounded like scolds. And I've said this before. There was
how does it mean
a virtue signaling that made it seem as if ordinary folks, if they did not say things in exactly the right way or meet this litmus test, that they were being chastised, pushed away. And the truth is, most of us, all of us, are complicated, and we have blind spots, and sometimes we say dumb stuff, and if you want to create an environment that is welcoming and makes people feel, okay, there's room for me here, then the message and the story we tell has to be, all right, none of us are perfect. All of us count. We all have good in us that we can tap into. We can all learn from each other. And I think that is something we need to recover. That's part of the fun of politics. That's part of the community and the social bonding that can come about. And we saw that in Minneapolis. I mean, somebody showed me a friend of mine, Michelle Norris, is from Minnesota, and she was up there, and she was going around talking to neighbors and people she'd known for a long time as they were mobilizing protests and activities around ICE. And she showed me a clip of this street band that was performing every night after all these activities had been taking place and protests, et cetera.
We have them a run again.
They were just out there and they were playing music, and I'm trying to figure out how they were playing
involved in
horns and drums, et cetera, in like 0 degree weather, because I would not have been able to put my lips on a trumpet. And people were celebrating what they had accomplished. And it was an embodiment of the values that make us care about other people. And that, I think, is a spirit that when Democrats tap into that spirit, then we win. The other side does the mean, angry,
demagoguery,
exclusive, us, them, divisive politics. That's their home court.
That is their.
Our court is
their way of
coming together. Our court is, look, a great example. Wasn't political. Bad Bunny's halftime show.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Well, it resonated. It was smart because it wasn't preaching. It was showing. It was demonstrating and displaying. This is what a community is. And people who did not speak Spanish and have never been to Puerto Rico, they saw that elderly woman serving a drink and the kids dancing with their grandmas, and intergenerational, and it was a reminder of what Dr. King called the beloved community can look like, which is not perfect, and it's messy sometimes. And, I guarantee you, not all those lyrics were probably politically correct. And if you translated them, and, they're, people are complicated, but there was a sense of, all right, there's room for everybody here.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where we win.
Your presidential center is opening up this summer, and you've dedicated your post-presidency to lifting up the next generation of leaders, oftentimes in defiance of people begging and pleading with you to stay involved in the political process. Right. And so why is it important for you to defer to those people, especially at a moment where it feels like there is a vacuum of leadership on the left? You are among, if not the most popular politician in America. And so you're right here, And so why is it important for you in this moment to make sure that you defer to others?
Well, first of all, I'm not a politician anymore, and I can't be, right? I mean, I guess technically I could run for, city council or something, but I'm not in elected office. I don't have levers of power. I'm term limited out. And by the way, I believe in the Constitution, and also I believe in my marriage, and Michelle would divorce me even if I could run again.
He's just a family guy now.
I've always believed. I mean, this has been a central tenet of my work, even before I was in elected office, that our job as leaders is to lift up other leaders, to empower others, to find their gifts and help them exercise those gifts. And so when I left the presidency, I said, what's our foundation going to do? We care about climate change. We care about racial justice. We care about healthcare. We care about a whole bunch of issues, and I work on those issues. Now, right now, I'm spending a lot of time helping to think about how we're going to respond to AI as it's coming down the pike, and it's moving fast. So I care about specific issues, but the thing I thought I could do uniquely, Michelle and I still have the capacity, not just here in the United States, but globally, to inspire and motivate young people and invite them in to this process. And that's what we need. We just talked about it. You look at where excitement's going to come from. It's going to come from the 20, 30-year-olds who know firsthand what it means to not be able to buy a house, know firsthand what it means to see some of the ladder's opportunity being taken away, have
maybe I should drink this,
grown up in a moment in which there's more social isolation, right? And so and understand both the good and the bad of social media. And so they're the ones who are going to craft these, who are going to remake our institutions so that they are consistent with the values that are, I think, timeless. And so what we've tried to do at the foundation has been to identify potential leaders, not just with traditional credentials, not just the kids coming out of fancy schools or with the top grades, but union organizers and grassroots organizers, as well as journalists and teachers and healthcare professionals and human rights activists. And we've now had thousands of folks go through the program, and these are folks who are doing remarkable stuff at very young ages. I mean, they're setting up health clinics in sub-Saharan Africa, or they're designing new programs for intervention in to help with the opioid crisis in Appalachia, or they're working on how do we educate kids and using technology in remote rural areas and Native American reservations. Remarkable folks are doing amazing stuff. And the Presidential Center, which will be opening up in June, is going to be the hub around which all this activity happens. And there'll be museum with Michelle's dresses, since that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
We'll have some sports memorabilia and some cool stuff in there. But really, the heart of the presidential center is going to be the music studio, to where kids are learning how to tell stories through music, and a place to record podcasts so they can learn how to talk about the issues in ways that resonate. And there's a Chicago Public Library in there, and there's an auditorium where young people will be exposed to world leaders who are coming through and can talk about their own journey. And what that does is it builds a community of activists, and it reminds people you're not alone. You're not alone in your sorrow when you see some of the stuff that's been happening in this country over the last year. But you're also not alone in being able to figure out how do we push back and come up with new solutions, and how do we remake these institutions so that they work for this generation. And that kind of spirit is what we hope this presidential center will constantly refresh and renew. This is kind of a social change university, and we want just ordinary visitors who don't think of themselves as activists, as they go through these exhibits and they see what's been done in the past. We want them to think, well, what can I do? And we'll be giving them all kinds of ways in which they can then connect with local organizations and get active in their own communities around the things that they care about. That kind of reinvigorating our civic muscles, giving people a sense of, I'm not going to just sit here and doom scroll or occasionally, tweet some complaint about what's happening, but that I actually have agency and I can actually make a difference. We want to encourage that. And that's what we saw and have been seeing across the country in response to the violations and overreach and lawlessness.
Like showing people
it's been coming out of this administration.
You have a choice.
We just have to encourage that and cultivate that, and not assume that it happens on its own. I became president because very early on in my career, I had people teach me the power of community and other people joining together around common interests. And I tried to I tried to manifest what I had learned in every campaign I ran, and try to ride that all the way through my presidency. And I didn't figure out all that stuff on my own. And we have a long history in this country, dating back to the abolitionist movement and the suffragist movement, and on through the civil rights movement and the union movement. And we have a long history internationally. Gandhi learning from Thoreau, who then inspires King, who then inspires Mandela, who in the meantime, like
there is the way
helping to, and solidarity,
like
helping to bring down the Iron Curtain, and
inspiration,
inspiring the people power in the Philippines, and there that spirit, that energy.
You could be the guy that gets,
and you can
guy
feel
or girl,
it, but it's bottled up.
Guy or woman,
enough outlets for young people to figure out, how do I become a part of that?
How cool would that be?
And that's this enormous untapped power that we have to get back to.
So I want to do a little bit of a lightning round here, because it's not often I'll get access to the President of the United States. So a couple questions here.
The real, I haven't seen him, and
he's been asked this question so many times. He's been asked this question already. He's answered it. Let's hear him answer it again. He's ready for
and
it.
they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless
I believe
there's
he's
this
telling the truth.
enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens? Who is there a person that you most want to meet that you haven't met yet?
They
I'll be
wouldn't
honest
tell the
with you.
president. I feel like
Being president,
there's a new
or even being
president
an
every 4
ex-president,
years.
I can kind of meet everybody. So I've met a lot of folks.
Yeah.
The person who I have not yet met, and that I'm looking forward to meeting, and I hope I get an opportunity
Show me the
sometime in the
aliens.
future, is the new Pope, who is from Chicago and a White Sox fan. I had the pleasure of getting to know Pope Francis pretty well, and he was legit. You know, there's some figures. He's one. The Dalai Lama was another. Is another who they're how you hope they are. They kind of walk the walk.
Yeah.
And my sense of this new Pope is he's from that. He's cut from that cloth.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who worked in places that really needed help, and what wasn't just preaching from a pulpit, but getting his hands dirty trying to help people. So I'm looking forward to talking to him.
I think we can. I think
at some point I'll probably have it. Yeah.
What world leader did you like the most and
Sometimes it gets
least?
a little dirty. It's a little messy.
I there are a lot of world leaders I enjoyed. Angela Merkel I became very close to because she really was the leader of Europe during my presidency, and we were grappling with a bunch of different stuff. She came from a center-right tradition. I obviously come from a center-left position, but she had integrity, very wicked smart, and we're both
Is he from Boston?
analytical and practical, and try to.
Oh shit. Where did a bomb grew up? Isn't it grow up? Oh, Hawaii! I knew that. I remember. Yeah, of course, I knew that. He was born in Honolulu. So I remember they were questioning. Remember back in the day when he was running against Donald Trump, and he was questioning like whether or not he was born in America. He was like, "Show me the immigration paper" or something like that, right? Like that was that was kind of wild, man. Like I forgot about all that. He returned to and he moved to Jakarta at age 6, where he attended local schools, both Catholic and public, and was known as Barry Sotoro. Returned to Honolulu in the 5th grade to live with his grandparents, Madeline and Stanley Dunham, and attended Punahou School. He's Hawaiian, of course, man. Attended Occidental College and transferred to Columbia University, New York. Graduated in 1983. He moved to Chicago in 1985 to work as a community organizer. His childhood in Hawaii and Indonesia often described in his memoir, "Dreams from My Father," shaped his according to a multicultural perspective. That's interesting.
Figure out how to problem solve, and so she became a very close partner to mine. I'm gonna defer on the leaders I like least. There's enough of a public record. People probably have a sense of some of the folks who I wasn't happy with.
Best prank out of the White House when you were president?
Look, I'll be honest with you.
He doesn't seem like a prankster.
Folks aren't running pranks in the White House. They're Secret Service. Everybody's busy.
No shit.
If there were pranks, they weren't run on me.
He doesn't seem like the type of guy to do
I
pranks,
tended not to pull pranks. People are intimidated enough by a president.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to punch down on a prank.
Yeah.
If you're gonna pull off a prank, it's got to be on somebody who can prank you back. And wasn't nobody gonna prank me.
All right, last question here: is Tupac alive?
Prank me. He's got Secret Service everywhere.
He's alive on my playlist.
All right, we'll leave it there.
There you go,
Mr. President.
I enjoyed it, Brian.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Keep up doing the good work.
That was really cool, man. Kevin Nealon returns. I actually really like Kevin Nealon. Should we watch this? This seems like it'd be really good.
About 2 years ago, I got an email from a guy who had a theory about the pyramids. And at first, I kind of ignored it. Because when it comes to the pyramids, the line between researcher and conspiracy theorist gets a little blurry. But he sent me all of his research, almost 10 years of work. And I did look at it eventually. And it completely changed the way that I look at the pyramids. He said the pyramids weren't built. They were unbuilt. And maybe all the missing evidence that we've been searching for, the ramps, the tools, the machinery, it's not missing at all. It's actually right in front of us, just misinterpreted. So I want to walk you through this theory today. But I'm not going to lie, this email did take me down a very
This should be kind of interesting.
Because for all the theories and simulations and 4,000 years of research and speculation, we actually know very little about how these structures were built. We can't understand the pyramids without talking about time, because the pyramids are very, very old. The cliche saying is that Cleopatra lived closer to the iPhone than she did to the construction of the pyramids. The ancient Romans would tour the pyramids like we tour the Colosseum today. And over that insane scale of time, things get blurry. But what we do know is that pyramids themselves were the endpoint of a massive architectural learning curve, each one taking about 10 to 15 years, and each one getting us closer to the Great Pyramid. 146 meters tall, 2.3 million blocks of stone. The base is almost a perfect square, off by mere centimeters, with a slope so razor precise, because even the slightest variation would mean a failure at the top. And the whole thing is aligned almost perfectly to true north, off by just 1/15 of a degree. And they did all of this without compasses or lasers or GPS. As far as we know, they used nothing but the stars. And if you scaled it to the size of the Earth, the height to base ratio would almost match the curvature of the planet. The latitude is the exact same number as the speed of light, and just 0.0002 degrees off from the pyramid's latitude is also this subway in Louisiana, because a lot of things exist on that latitude. But you see, the pyramids seem so impossible, and our understanding is so limited that it's just the perfect breeding ground for conspiracy theories. But it is worth remembering, if any civilization could pull this off, it's probably the Egyptians. Every year, the Nile flooded, and it turned the valley into a surplus machine with ridiculous amounts of grain, enough to feed tens of thousands of people who weren't farming. Remember our video on the Romans? They got their grain from Egypt. And that kind of surplus meant Egypt had something incredibly rare in the ancient world.
There's more
time, labor, and stability for massive multi-year engineering projects. And they created incredible inventions like counter-weighted lifting devices, mummification, star-aligned surveying tools, and one of the most accurate calendars on Earth, long before most civilizations could even write. On top of that, you have a hyper-organized bureaucracy that tracked everything. We literally have a 4,500-year-old site manager's logbook, where this guy named Mirror documents how his crew boated the Tura limestone to the pyramid site. In fact, we have records for everything, like how they brought the stone, who they hired, and even the payroll. Everything except how they actually built the pyramids. Oh, by the way, they weren't built by slaves. Archaeologists found entire
skilled
workers'
laborers.
districts at Giza with bakeries and workshops and medical teams, and even the tombs of the craftsmen.
That was
These were skilled labor crews, not an oppressed workforce. And despite keeping diligent records of all of this, when it comes to the construction drawings, it's kind of like they said, well, let's mess with those guys a little bit. Because maybe they knew that we were going to be arguing about this for centuries.
maybe.
There are a lot of theories about how these pyramids were built. Cranes, counterweights, kites, water elevators. But there's two big ones, ramps. In the classic one, external ramp theory, workers drag the blocks up a huge ramp as the pyramid rises. It's very simple, in theory, to keep the slope gentle enough for normal humans and not physical 100s. The ramp would need to stretch around 2 kilometers. Anything shorter or steeper, people probably start dying on you. Well, things get a little challenging. By the time you've built a ramp that's safe to walk on, you've basically cost yourself more materials and labor just to build the thing that builds the thing. And the real killer is there is zero archaeological evidence of a mile-long ramp ever existing or being torn down. And then there's a twist on this theory. A ramp spiraling around the pyramid, shorter, more compact, reusing the same slope over and over. But now you have a different problem. The faces of the pyramid are perfectly straight. Otherwise, the edges can't meet at the apex. But to keep it at this precise angle, the builders had to constantly check the edges. But with a fat ramp in the way, it's blocking all the corners that you need access to. So if the ramp isn't outside, maybe it's inside. In the 1980s, someone saw a fox entering the Great Pyramid near the base and somehow popping out hundreds of feet higher. That little fox inspired the French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin to propose a hybrid system. A short external ramp made of limestone for the very first third of the structure, which is then reused top part once it's done. Then a hidden ramp spiraling inside the structure. It very neatly explains this missing debris, and it even answers some of the mysteries around the Grand Gallery, which Houdin thinks was a giant counterweight system for hoisting the granite beams found in the king's chamber. It also explains why it's so tall and narrow and lined with strange benches and covered in scuff marks, as if something hard and heavy slid through it over and over again. It's elegant, but then in 2015, the pyramids got a giant CT scan.
I can make that full coffee.
This is muon tomography. Think of muons as high-energy particles from space that are constantly raining down on Earth. They pass through rock, but very dense areas slow them down. So if you put detectors inside and around the pyramid and wait long enough, you can build a 3D density map, kind of like a medical CT scan, and you can do all of this without touching a single stone. And in 2015, they found something crazy. A massive, unexplained void just above the Grand Gallery, which led to thousands of new theories overnight. But what they didn't find was a clean spiral running just under the surface. If a kilometer-long ramp was hiding there, let's say, you would expect at least a faint trace, but instead, the scan shows scattered voids. It doesn't necessarily kill the idea, but it strongly weakens the argument. And then most other pyramid construction theories are variations on these two. The thing about these theories is that most of them actually work until you reach the top. The apex is actually the hardest part of the whole structure, because even a tiny error at the base becomes a huge deviation at the top. The edges need to be perfectly straight, so you need full access to all 4 faces and lots of room to work. With an external ramp, you eventually have to remove it or drastically shrink the ramp right when you need it the most. With an internal ramp, the higher you get, you are losing the turning radius, the hauling space, and of course the ability to check the edges. When you look at pyramids in other cultures, you start to notice a lot of them dodged this issue
that,
with a
like,
flat top.
perfection.
Even Egyptian pyramids later lose their tips. This is why, according to this Egyptologist, although pyramids were made all over the world, only the Egyptian pyramids are considered a miracle of the world. In other words, this sharp apex actually is the rarest and hardest part to explain, and the key to the pyramid's construction. By the way, all of this background research and custom assets we created for this video, we decided to put it on a dedicated page. And we built the whole thing in Framer, who's also the sponsor of this video. Framer is a design tool that lets you iterate with precision and turn your design ideas into a live website with a single click. Each of the theories get their own section, but there are so many other interesting pieces of history that we had to include. All the live previews and interactive alignment tools made it very easy for us to see results instantly. You can even animate the elements in full 3D without getting into code. Everything works through simple transform controls inside Framer. Framer also has a huge built-in font library, so although Papyrus might have been on theme, finding something Egyptian and also modern was surprisingly easy, and we didn't want to risk triggering any graphic designers. It's also super easy to see how it can adapt across different devices, and our whole team can build on the same project together in real time. You can find our research page linked in the description, along with a Framer link and a discount code if you want to check it out. Let's get to this email that I received 2 years ago, which actually kickstarted my obsession with the pyramids. His name is Hyuni Choi, and he's not an architect, not an Egyptologist, just someone who spent 10 years obsessively modeling every measurable stone at Giza, like thousands of blocks, hand-placed in 3D. And at first, I thought it was a little bit, feels a little conspiracy theory. But then I did read the research, and I realized he wasn't trying to solve the pyramid. He was trying to solve the system that produces a pyramid. He says the Great Pyramid wasn't built on its own, but through a chain of sacrificial structures that are designed to be cannibalized. Let me explain. Before the Great Pyramids was a natural limestone outcrop with small hills. Most of the core blocks for Khufu's pyramid was carried directly from this plateau, with finer casing limestone brought from Tura and granite from Aswan. And they really used this landscape to their advantage. First, they identified the high points, shaved them, and terraced them, turning the hill into a working platform. Then you overbuild. Instead of starting with a pyramid shape, you create a rough, gigantic trapezoidal step mass with an integrated ramp system. And once the ramp reaches its full height, you start carving it down into the final pyramid shape. Remember the apex problem? Even the tiniest error at the base explode into huge deviations at the top. But if you work downward from a wide, stable platform, it's much easier to retain this precise angle. The shape is actually super important here. If we were to apply the system to a pyramid shape, the ramp would get steeper and higher as you go up, creating another death slide for the workers. But a trapezoid spreads outward at the top, and it gives you this workable 7-degree ramp all the way up. A flat, safe working deck around the apex, and full visibility of all 4 edges as you carve the final geometry. Instead of fighting the pyramid shape, you delay it until the very end. Once you carve down the step mass, the extra limestone is then reused for the other pyramids. The Great Pyramid is roughly 6 million tons. Choi's model estimates the initial step mass to be around 8 million tons. Carving that down gives you roughly 2 million tons of reusable stone. This gets split between the working mass for Khafre's pyramid and into the other annex buildings. Then this process is repeated for the other pyramids, each one going through the same recursive construction loop. Once you add all of the stone that moves through this loop, you get around 14 million tons circulating through the system, with roughly 1 million tons left over, which weirdly lines up with the mainstream volume estimates for the entire Giza complex. What's interesting about this theory is that it treats the entire plateau as a single construction engine and a closed-loop system. And it actually matches Egyptian behavior. Because the Egyptians were really into recycling. They turned broken boats into furniture, broken furniture became small objects, and later dynasties literally mined old pyramids for new buildings. So a cannibalizing system for the pyramids kind of feels like a very Egyptian thing to do. And the idea of shaping the earth into ramps, that's not new either. Before the crane, which was invented by the Greeks in the 6th century BC, the landscape was the machinery. The dolmens, the Karnaks, and the early temples, they all shaped the earth into construction engines to build structures that feel impossible. And most importantly, this system explains one of the biggest flaws of the external ramp theory: the missing debris. The ramps weren't lost through time, they were repurposed. But this led me to another very unpleasant thought. See, most theories fail not because we find something wrong, it fails because we find nothing. The massive external ramp, no debris. The internal spiral ramp, no signs of a continuous spiral. The water shaft theory, no canals, no cuttings, no retaining walls. And this way of disproving based on negative evidence totally makes sense from a proper archaeological point of view. But what if that evidence didn't disappear through time, but by design? Maybe for them, a sacred form should not have any trace of a human builder. Maybe they always recycle the construction evidence. Maybe they always restore the site to purity, removed every mark and trace that could give away the construction method. It also means that the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. But sometimes an architectural detail can reveal the construction method, even if they try to hide it. This YouTuber, History for Granite, went through an insane journey to catalog around 6,000 surviving casing stones across 3 sides of Khafre's pyramid. And he found a pattern: tiny tapered stones forming vertical streams on each facade, which he calls bonding stones. A more common masonry term is keying stones, which are essentially smaller, special pieces of stone that can slide down to stitch 2 masonry runs together. And it actually reveals a lot. First, different sections were laid simultaneously by different crews for efficiency, and then stitched together. Second, since there's no bonding stones at the centers or the corners, these weren't ending lines, they were starting lines. The last and most importantly, all 3 faces show the exact same pattern. This is pretty important because if there was a giant external ramp attached to the structure, you would probably see hotspots of bonding stones around the working edge. It doesn't prove any single theory, but it strongly suggests that the casing had to be carefully stitched together from multiple directions, and the crews likely had a wide, stable working deck around a clean, unobstructed pyramid core. Again, this is not proof of any one theory, but maybe it can disprove some theories. So how do we know for sure? Like, how does a theory become proof?
Mr. Wizard, but it's a real power plant and will generate electricity. When I move the gas flame under the flask, the water inside will be heated to boiling.
In math or hard science, proof is pretty absolute. You run the experiment, anyone can repeat it, and if the result holds, then it's true, until someone disproves it. But with archaeology, well, you can't really run the build the Great Pyramid as a lab experiment. So instead, a theory can get stronger if it first predicts what we should find, and then on ground, those predictions match the real traces, and different kinds of evidence all start making sense under that same explanation. And even then, other experts will try to break it. With the pyramids, it's even harder because we're missing the entire construction phase, and we can't dismantle Khufu, and multiple methods could produce the exact same final shape. So it's less, this is absolutely true, and it's more, for now, this is the least wrong answer. And after months and months of digging into this, for a brief second, I also wondered, could it have been the aliens? And I think there's a tiny part of me that kind of wanted to believe it, because it really hurts to think that we might never know the answer. But I know that that's just my cognitive closure topic, because our brains hate gaps in information. But maybe That's the whole point. In a world where we can Google almost anything, the pyramids are one of the last things we can't force into clarity. And maybe if we understood them perfectly, they would lose the thing that makes them kind of extraordinary. So, what do you guys think?
Ads. How
Do
come
you think we're ever going to solve the mystery of the pyramids?
ad block?
Let me know in the comments.
Sorry.
And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.
I was thinking I was like ads.
An IQ of 85 to 115 is considered average in the US, and IQ of 115 to 145 is considered high, and an IQ 145 is considered genius. Are you curious to know where you stack up? You can take this 2-minute IQ test.
About 2 years ago, I got
I feel like those IQ tests, they test a very specific type of intelligence. And sometimes there's more to being intelligent in life, I feel like, too. Being creative, having an imagination, and who the fuck is this guy? Okay. I had a friend, a really close friend back in high school, junior high. He was a massive Bruce Lee fan, and he was a really good athlete, a better athlete than me. And the way that his body is shaped was like Muhammad Ali. And like I feel like Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali and like a lot of these fighters, they have like this kind of similar body type with like the angles, and I think it lends itself to like quickness. I don't have that, like the incredible quickness, like the way you can punch super fast. There's a specific body, and I think it has to be uh, I think it's given through genetics. Mm-mm. Well, a combination of genetics and um, like working out. It's kind of cool. What else should I watch? This is really sad. A sad one, man. Here, like, I love the way he is. He's very positive. He's not sad. He's not angry. He's not. Um, yeah. What an amazing man, I gotta say. And I feel like, at least me personally, like, I wish I could give him my life. Honestly, like, if I had a choice of who could survive, I would be like him. You could have my life. People are gonna do that, aren't they? People will take advantage of every situation. I've learned that. 1.8 million likes. Everybody click the button, man. Oh, my shirt. 1.8 million likes. Okay, how do I share my... I forgot how I did this. How did I do this? Share screen? Oh, that is the way. Hang on. Let's just see here. I'm gonna try and close this. I'm trying to reduce the amount of what you call it. How come this is not working? What happened? Oh, it's no longer live. Hopefully nothing happened there. Do I have to reset the clock? Oh, there we go. It just takes a second, eh? That's kind of scary. I don't know if I like that. I don't think I can do that anymore. I think I have to reset the clock again.
Goal. The final thing I would want to say is my sincere apologies.
Is it working? How come I let's just see. Worst case scenario, I'll just do it again tomorrow. I just want to make sure. If I gotta pee again, dude. Fuck, doesn't look like it. Oh man, an hour and 20 minutes. Fuck, dude. I do have GoPro footage. This is just. I knew there's going to be challenges.
Goal. The final thing I would want to say is my sincere apologies.
Just put a chair over something. I think it's the transitioning. Okay, I'll reset the clock. I'm gonna have it on sharing. I'm just not gonna take it off. I'll just always have it sharing. I have to pee again too. I'm not peeing on stream. If I can learn that the hard way.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
I had hoped
Yeah, it didn't happen
that
at, like,
I would
hour 5 or
continue
something.
in the next 10 or even 15 years. And even once I was diagnosed, I'd hoped it would be here 2 or 3 more years, and it's turned out to be only a few more months. And my apologies for that. It really makes me feel like I've let everybody down. So,
I don't think anybody.
there's not much more to say than that. So, I guess the final line, I have not really rehearsed this, is I'm really glad to have had this opportunity to do all of the stuff that we've done. I really hope that it's been helpful. I really appreciate you watching, commenting, and participating. And I have probably very few regrets in what we've done here. I think we've been, for the most part, successful. I hope you agree. So, as always, don't try this at home. And thanks for watching.
I am heartbroken to announce that what you heard is true. Paul Harrell has passed away. It was his wish that I maintain his legacy through this channel by continuing to put out high-quality educational content with the flair we all know and love from him. I ask that you give the crew and myself some time to process the death of my brother and find the best way to honor his memory. I thank everyone in advance for your patience and understanding, and we will get channel updates as we move through this together. I would ask everyone to keep any personal politics or religious beliefs out of any postings regarding Paul on any of our social media. In keeping with Paul's mystery, I cannot tell you what his beliefs were or where he ended up. All I can tell you is that he is now where a man belongs and will remain an inspiration to us all. Thank you.
Some of you know me, but many of you don't. My name is Brad Nelson, and I've been Paul's editor / post-production guy / manager for many years now, ever since his channel was very small. I had the great privilege of having Paul in my life and having him as a friend. He's a very generous and kind guy, and he told the best campfire stories. He's positively influenced many people's lives, including my own, and I'm very grateful for that. We are going to be continuing his legacy by
What more can you ask for?
uploading videos on this channel eventually, and continuing to educate people the way that Paul did. But you can continue his legacy as well by sharing your knowledge with other people and your enthusiasm for firearms and the outdoors, and just by being curious and striving to learn new things like Paul did. Thank you for all the support that you've given Paul and the rest of us over all these years.
range today, and we're talking about mass shootings, their causes, and some possible solutions. This is a topic that a lot of people have been talking about lately, and typically I would leave it to those people who are more eloquent than I am. However, I've heard a lot of people saying a lot of things with which I disagree. I've also heard a lot of people saying a lot of things, but they are not saying some of the things that I think really need to be said. So here I am. Now, today's presentation will be long and tedious, and although there will be some demonstration, most of it will be lecture. I have a disdain for lecture, but in this particular case, I think the importance of the information outweighs my disdain. So let me give you a synopsis of what we're going to talk about today. First, an introduction of who I am as it pertains to this topic. Secondly, some disclaimers and caveats. Third, a discussion of why the question, what causes mass shootings, is so difficult to ask and why it's so difficult to answer. And four, some possible solutions that might alleviate some of the problem of mass shootings in our society. So let's get started with my introduction. Typically, I don't introduce myself because for the most part, the people who tune in to watch what we do here either already know who I am or they don't care. And most of the time, who I am isn't really relevant. However, in this particular case, I'm representing myself as someone who has information that you might not have. And anytime you're getting information, you should evaluate the validity of that source. And since today your source is me, let me tell you a little bit about who I am as it pertains to this topic. My name's Paul Harrell, and I'm retired military personnel. I spent 4 years in the active duty Marine Corps. Part of that time was as a member of the security contingent on a Navy base, and part of that time was as a combat marksmanship instructor at the Marine Corps Security Forces School. So as a member of the security on the Navy base, I had to attend certain training. Above and beyond infantry training school, I was in 0311, I went to the Navy's basic CRF school. It's like a SWAT school. And I went to some training on security procedures as they pertain to that application. For being a combat marksmanship instructor, I had to attend a school called the Formal Schools Instructor Course, where you learn to select tasks for training, write class outlines, conduct classes. And I had to go to marksmanship training above and beyond what Marines were typically getting at that time. So I went to a pistol course at Gunsight. I went to the Ray Chapman Academy of Practical Shooting, and some other things. Now, when I left the Marine Corps, I went into the Army National Guard. Again, I was in the infantry. I was in 11 Bravo 40. I spent part of my time in the National Guard in an air assault unit and part of that time in a light infantry company. So I went to air assault school, master fitness trainer school, basic and advanced NCO school, jungle operations, cold weather training. The list goes on. In addition to that, I did a deployment in the Middle East in the recent war. So yes, I'm a war veteran, but I'll be the first to tell you that I did nothing over there that was in any way noteworthy. I also went to New Orleans for the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Very interesting. Not only that, I was able to participate in some military shooting competitions, winning state, regional, national, and international shooting titles. And I have participated in shooting competitions at local gun clubs. And I can say that I have won shooting competitions with everything from muskets to machine guns. And I've done a fair amount, not a great deal, but a fair amount of hunting. Birds, rabbits, deer, elk, buffalo. I've also been in 2 citizen-involved self-defense shootings. So, put succinctly, I have a lot of training and experience on firearms and their use. Now, in addition to all of that, I attended some classes at community college. Along with your typical mathematics and English, I took classes on anatomy and physiology, biology, microbiology, chemistry, cultural and physical anthropology, psychology, sociology, public speaking, acting, and theater class. And I got A's in all of those classes. That training, that education, along with a lifetime of life experiences, makes me uniquely qualified to talk to you about this subject. I also work with a group of people that I call the crew. These are people with their own unique set of education, training, and life experiences. And they include current and former military personnel, current and retired law enforcement personnel, building contractors, auto mechanics, healthcare professionals. And they bring to the table a lot of things that help me put together presentations like this. One of my crew is a police officer who actually dealt with a family annihilation case, which is a type of mass shooting, and we'll discuss more about that later.
Wait, I don't know.
Another of my crew is a retired police officer who many years ago was the first or second police officer to arrive on the scene of a real live mass shooting where someone armed themselves, went into a crowded establishment, shot people at random. And I can say that although I've never been in a mass shooting, I have been shot at on a few occasions.
What the hell are you right there? Yes, you can stream the 2026 Winter Olympics on YouTube, primarily through a subscription to YouTube TV. This offers access to NBC's live coverage. Additionally, the official Olympics YouTube channel streams select events in some regions. Live coverage is available here. That's good. I never used to be like that. In Canada, CBC Sports streams coverage on YouTube and other regions. Live content will be available. So let's see. If I were to go to YouTube, if I were to look for This one with Mary. Nice.
And
I think it's one.
put down to the bottom line of all of this, it puts me in a position where what I'm telling you today is not purely academic. Some of it comes from real-world experience. Now, our list of 4 caveats, disclaimers, and yabbits, some of which you've already noticed. Number 1, you may have noticed that in addition to my Shatner-esque pauses, I also have a slight speech impediment. The very annoying habit of sometimes leaving a syllable out of a word, or adding a syllable to it, or transposing words or syllables. I'm going to ask you to just bear with me. Although we try to keep these presentations family friendly, they really are made for an adult. If you are someone whose behavior was arrested when you were in the 3rd grade, and so you still gain some sense of well-being by making fun of somebody else's speech patterns, then today's presentation is not for you. Please turn it off now. Okay, if you're still here, I'm going to expect you to be able to conduct yourself as an adult. Now, the second thing that we have to discuss is that what we do here, not just in today's presentation, but in general in this format, our goal is to put out useful information, if not useful, at least interesting. And I find that interjecting humor into the things we talk about helps to get the message across, makes it so it's not so tedious, and it's really a good way to go. Sometimes we do things just for fun. Today is not one of those times. This is a very serious and somber subject, and humor has no place in it. If I do say something that sounds funny, it was...
Yeah, this is a very serious topic, though. This is airtight. I forgot, man. Fuck. I can't eat anything. I don't remember sleep.
unintentional. And I expect everyone watching me right now to conduct themselves appropriately. Now, the third thing, we have to talk about
6 hours,
different versions of events. I have found that anytime we're talking about something that happened, whether 5 people saw something happened or whether the news...
I could literally go to sleep and wake up and test my pee. Why don't I just do that, man? I'm gonna do that as well. I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna stream for... I'll have the camera streaming at my face consistently for 7 hours, and I will stream the entire sleep and then wake up and do a pee test. Like with this small window, it's actually kind of cool.
Covered it on a national level. There are always different versions of events.
So I want to do like
and I can only discuss the versions that I've read or that I've heard or that I've seen. We have to understand there are different versions of events. So please don't tell me anything like, no, that's not what happened. What really happened was, unless you were there. We also have to understand that the mainstream media has a habit of getting things wrong. And we have other presentations where we talk about that at length. But suffice it to say that the mainstream media is quite often mistaken and quite often prints things that didn't really happen. Or doesn't print things that does happen. We also know that there are different sides of issues, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, a Democrat or a Republican, whether you subscribe to the philosophy of less filling or subscribe to the philosophy of taste great. We know that on different sides, both sides will twist the facts to fit their narrative and their agenda. We know that, and we don't have to harp on it. We don't have to discuss that any more than what I've said right now. And fourth, we have to remember that everything I'm saying today are my conclusions and my opinions. My opinions are based on my education, my training, my experience. Different people have different experiences, so they have different opinions. I make no claim that my opinion has its origin in the mind of greatness. And if someone does tell you that their opinion has such origins, you should be very incredulous. The question, what causes mass shootings? And even more so, why is that question so difficult to ask and so difficult to answer? That particular subject will take up most of today's presentation. It will require me to do a lot of monologuing, and it really will require you to have a lot of patience with my
That's
speech
crazy.
patterns.
I went to workout once.
Now, it goes like
and
this.
I'm already putting almost, I think carrying the
The
water
question people
bottles.
typically ask is, how do we stop
Being a
mass
delivery
shootings? How do we
driver,
reduce
some of
their
those
numbers? How
bags
do we
are
prevent
heavy,
them?
man. It's
How
a
do
bit
we
of a
solve this
workout.
problem? And when you ask that question, you will immediately get a lot of answers that are very angry, they're emotionally charged, they're politically charged. When really the answer to the question, how do we stop mass shootings, should be the question, what's causing mass shootings? Why are these things happening? That has to be the beginning of how you solve the problem. And I've discussed this before. Now, let me give you a very simplistic example. You have a car and your car battery keeps going dead. And you ask the question, how do I keep my battery from constantly going dead? You should really ask the question, why does your battery keep going dead? Is it because your battery is very old and won't hold a charge? Your alternator's malfunctioning? Or maybe it has to do with your annoying habit of always leaving your headlights on. Once you answer the question, why your battery is going dead, then the fix becomes very easy. Maybe that buzzer that's supposed to sound when you open the door while your headlights are on, and on your car it doesn't work. The solution is go down to the shop and get that buzzer fixed. And that won't change your habit of leaving your headlights on, but at least you'll know that there's a problem when you do. Once you know why something's happening, very often the solution becomes simple. Now, in the case of mass shootings, not so much. It's a very complex topic. But still, the question, how do we stop mass shootings, needs to be answered with the question, what's causing these mass shootings? Fair enough. But when you ask the question, what's causing mass shootings, again, you get a lot of answers that are emotionally charged, they're politically charged. There are people coming to conclusions based on erroneous information, and you get a lot of anger and resentment and argument, as opposed to people really trying to resolve the problem. And so typically when I discuss this, which I'm called upon to do occasionally, I want to start with finding some things on which we can agree. There's a great deal of disagreement on this topic. And I think there's primarily 4 things on which most of us would agree. 1, mass shootings occur. Now, don't get ahead of me there. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But 1, mass shootings occur. 2, there are more mass shootings occurring now than there was a long time ago, like back in the 1970s, 1960s, 1950s. There's more occurring now than there used to be. 3, we would like there to be fewer mass shootings. Oh, and if you're someone who thinks that there should be more of them, please turn this presentation off now. Okay, if you're still here. We would like there to be fewer. And 4, I think that we could disagree on what we should do, but I think we would all agree that there are solutions, and that if we as a society do the right things, we can greatly reduce the number of mass shootings. Okay, now, when we agree on those things, then it opens the floor for discussion. However, one of the reasons why this question is so difficult to ask and so difficult to answer is because I can't even get those 4 things out without people needing to argue about it. They have an insatiable, maniacal need to argue with who they see as the opposition, even if they happen to know that on this particular topic, the opposition is correct. And a good example is when I say, I think we could all agree we'd like to have fewer mass shootings, there's always somebody who will angrily say that they want there to be none. Okay, then right now we have a number of them. None would be less than what's happening now, so you can agree we'd like there to be fewer. No, I don't agree. I'd like there to be none. And we end up in this debate over semantics instead of substance. Now, when this kind of thing happens, there's a tactic that you can use, and it's not a debating tactic to try to corner someone. It's a problem-solving technique. And I'll say something like, okay, would you agree that 5 plus 5 is 10? Now, the reason you say that is because obviously it is 10 and people would agree. And then you can say, okay, then we find something that we agree on. The problem, though, is that these people are so maniacal about arguing over minutia that they know what I'm trying to do and they can't let me be right about anything. So even though 5 plus 5 is 10, they won't agree that it is. They'll tell me that that's irrelevant and stupid and has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Because they need to argue more so than they need to solve the problem. And I'm going to say something that I know is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings. That is this. To solve this problem, we need qualified people having an honest discussion with each other, trying to figure out why is this happening, and then coming up with some solutions and implementing them. When you argue over things like we want there to be none instead of using the word fewer, you delay that process. Your need to argue, even when you know the person you're arguing with happens to be right on that particular point, you delay solving the problem. Therefore, more mass shootings, more people are going to be killed, and some of that blood is on your hands. This is something we have to deal with. Now, there are 3 other things that I see as major barriers to effective communication when discussing why do mass shootings occur. And
26 seconds, right? I'm getting distracted. That's exactly what I wanted to see. What kind of control? Like, you know how they say like it was an act of God? What about an act of the devil? Right? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, okay. That's exactly what YouTube or Google said.
One of those is
So
the people who deny that they occur. The really best example of this is the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. There was one person in particular who went on a real big campaign trying to convince everyone that that didn't happen. Now, as we said earlier, mainstream media gets things wrong. I'm sure the details of the exacts of what happened can be debated. And of course, both sides of any issue are going to try to twist and turn those details to their own political advantage. But we can't deny that that event did in fact happen. And as near as I can tell, the person who was denying that, his main goal was to draw attention to some products he was trying to sell. But when you perpetrate that fiction, and even worse, when other people believe that fiction, you are slowing down the solution to this problem. Instead of learned people having a discussion, trying to come up with a solution, they have to spend their time refuting that fiction that such things don't occur.
it's just a waste of time.
When you perpetrate
Time
such
and effort.
fictions, or when you believe such fictions, you are slowing down the process of solving this problem. More shootings are going to occur, and some of that blood is on your hands. Now, another thing that we have that, again, is a barrier to effective communication is padding the data. There are a lot of people that champion a lot of causes. And whatever cause they have, whether it's the plight of stray animals or backyard swimming pool safety, any of those things, to them that cause is very important. And sometimes those things are important to the rest of us if we know about them. But to get more attention on their problems, a lot of times people will try to make that problem seem worse than it really is. And the backyard swimming pool guy will try to make it appear as though more backyard drownings occur than are really occurring. And he'll say that this many occurred, and you start looking at his data and you find that some of those were not toddlers falling into a swimming pool and drowning. They were adults committing suicide. He includes in his cases of backyard swimming pool drownings, cases of mom giving her infant a bath in the sink, getting distracted by the phone, and the infant drowns. That's terrible, but it's not a backyard swimming pool drowning. And so rather than dealing with the problem, rather than be able to come up with a solution, we instead have to deal with refuting his fiction. And so I'm looking at this with the thought of, well, I don't know how bad this problem is, but I do know that you're lying to me or you're terribly incompetent at collecting data. And it works against those people he's trying to help. And we see that with mass shootings. Now, one of the things that I hear posited is the idea that mass shootings are occurring a lot more now than they did in the 1970s, 1960s, 1950s.
That's crazy. Like,
And you
I feel like I get like flashbacks from like when I used I don't know if I could say this on stream, but
will usually hear that put forth by people who are pro-gun rights. They are Second Amendment activists. And what they're trying to say is that mass shootings, although they've always occurred, there's a whole lot more now than there used to be. And so as we get more and more and more and more gun control, it's not solving the problem. Ergo, more gun control is not a solution. Well, to counter that, there are people who are saying, no, that's not the case. There's always been lots of mass shootings.
antidepressant.
In preparation for today's presentation, I was trying to do some research on that, and I found something that listed, so they claimed, all of the mass shootings in the United States from 1900 until 1999. And when I looked at that, I was expecting to see a lot more mass shootings in the 1980s than there were in the 1970s, and that wasn't the case. So the idea that there used to be less isn't true. Oh, wait, until you start looking at the fine print.
Causes my eyes to...
And when I see this list of mass shootings in the 1970s, There are some things on there that would be mass shootings in the way we understand them, as in someone arms themselves, goes into a crowded place like a mall or a grocery store and just starts shooting everyone. But some of the things they included
I've
were
taken lots of these. So
rival gangs shooting at each other over a drug deal gone bad. Okay, that's not what we really think of when we think of mass shootings. One of them they included was a case where the KKK and the American Nazi Party were having a rally right next to where the American Communist Party was having a counter rally. The two factions got in a big argument, which turned into a gunfight. 5 people were killed. Okay, that's not a mass shooting in the way we're thinking of them. And as I read down these, you see cases of where it was just a robbery and someone killed the people who were present at whatever he was robbing just to get rid of witnesses. And the absolute cherry on top of this nonsense was that they included as a mass shooting the events at Kent State in 1970. Now, if you're not familiar with that, Kent State University in Ohio, in 1970, there was a big anti-Vietnam War protest going on, and the National Guard was there. There was a conflict between the protesters and the National Guard, and there's many different versions of exactly what happened that day. But what is not in dispute is the National Guard fired on the protesters, killing 4 of them. This chart actually included that as a mass shooting. Yeah, that's not the mass shooting in any way that relates to what we're talking about now. That has no similarity with someone going into a grocery in Buffalo, New York, and shooting as many people as he can. And so what you see is that people are manipulating the data to try to make their point. Don't get me wrong, on any sides of any argument, whether skim milk is better than 2%, there are always people that are going to twist the data to their own conclusions. But in this particular case, where we're talking about mass shootings, by manipulating the data like that, what has happened is, instead of being able to have an intelligent, productive discussion that can come to some solutions, instead of doing that, we have to refute that guy's fiction.
Like an outline?
And therefore, you've delayed the solution.
It's almost like a hallucination.
Therefore, more mass shootings. Therefore, some of that blood is on that guy's hands.
Like there's like
and that
contract
is a responsibility that we all must incur when you're perpetrating fictions like that. Now, another real barrier to effective communication when we ask the question, what causes mass shooting, are people's political agendas.
I guess people
will immediately want to,
like, the use of psychedelics on YouTube, right? Just thought. I'm trying to see it. And you know what? I think I had like, it was like ounce. I've been definitely, I had the entire, I don't know if I should talk for it. Okay. Maybe not. Like,
put their political agenda into this discussion. And sometimes it's an agenda that just doesn't belong, like the backyard swimming pool guy. When you have a discussion, what causes mass shootings? And he says, we shouldn't be worrying about that. We should be worrying about backyard swimming pools. Okay, that is a legitimate concern. But that's not what we're talking about here today. And so we have now just delayed having meaningful dialogue on it, have to deal with that guy's political agenda. And you will see the same thing in all kinds of issues with all kinds of political agendas. Some people will perpetrate the nonsense that if public schools served vegan lunches, then these mass shootings wouldn't occur. Yeah, you know, if veganism is your bag, great. But I got to go with that probably doesn't have a lot to do with mass shootings. Especially since the guy who shot the school in Uvalde, Texas, bear with me if I'm saying that wrong, wasn't a student at the school. And you will see these kind of political agendas. Now, about the best real-world example I could come up with is quite some time ago, here in the United States, there was a group of terrorists who hijacked 4 planes. Their plan being that they would use those 4 planes as weapons, committing suicide attacks on various buildings. I'm sure you've all heard of this. Now, 2 of those planes hit the 2 buildings of the World Trade Center, 1 hit the Pentagon. The other one, the passengers on the plane got in a big fight with the terrorists and ended up crashing the plane and killing everyone aboard. But at least it didn't hit whatever their target was supposed to be. Okay. It is my understanding that those terrorists were armed with edged weapons, primarily box cutter knives. But shortly after those events, I had quite a few discussions, quite a few people, and there were people telling me that those events illustrated why we need less gun control. We need to repeal a lot of gun control laws and certainly not enact any more. Because if we did, things like that wouldn't happen. Okay, so are you suggesting people should be allowed to take their guns on the plane? Well, no. You are aware that the hijackers weren't armed with guns. Yeah, but if we had less gun control, things like that wouldn't happen. Okay. Now, again, both sides of issues do the same things. I had even more discussions with people who tried to use the September 11th hijackings to illustrate their point as a part of their political agenda of why we needed more gun control. Okay, you understand you're already not allowed to take a gun on a plane, and there's a lot of things in place to keep you from doing that, and that these hijackers weren't armed with guns. And when I say that, yeah, but if we had more gun control, things like that wouldn't happen. And you see people bringing their political agendas into something where it just doesn't belong. Now, when we talk about mass shootings, we are talking about shootings, so we are talking about guns. And with that, it is inexorable that gun control is going to become part of this discussion. And as I discuss this particular point, many people will accuse me of having a political agenda. You know, I really don't. Although, obviously, as a firearms owner, as a firearms instructor, I own quite a few firearms. This is my business. I am going to be pro-gun rights. But that's not really part of what I'm about to discuss. Fourth on my list of why the question, what causes mass shootings, is so hard to ask and so hard to answer, is because of a fraud that some people perpetrate in that discussion. And there's a few parts to it.
Is there a microphone on here?
Where some people will say, the reason you have so many shootings is because these days certain things are going on. And when they say these days, what they mean is that there are things happening right now or in the last few years that allow these mass shootings to occur that weren't present 30, 40, 50 years ago. Or things that were present then that prevented such things that aren't present now. And people will say mass shootings are occurring more now than they used to because these days it's so easy to get guns. Now, when you say that, that implies that 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, that it was harder to get guns. Yeah, that's not true. But like all good lies, this thing of these days guns are so easy to get has a slight, tiny little piece of truth to it. There are certain types of firearms, such as true antique firearms that were made in the 1890s or before, that can be exempt from some of the background check shipping restrictions. If guns are of modern manufacture, but they are muzzle-loading firearms, even though it's brand new, it's made the exact same way Davy Crockett's rifle was made, powder, patch ball. Those are exempt from a lot of gun laws and can be shipped through the mail and things like that. And so when someone says you can mail order a gun, that's not 100% false. It's only about 99% false. But there are people who perpetrate the fiction that these days guns are a lot easier to get than they were back then. And that's just not true. In the 1950s and most of the 1960s, you could ship guns through the mail. You mail ordered them out of catalogs. You'd see an ad in a magazine. You'd take the magazine and cut the ad out, put that and your check in the mail, allow 6 to 8 weeks for delivery, and they'd send you your gun. No background check, no age restrictions, nothing.
Rick Harrison?
The idea that guns are easier to get now than they were back then is just fiction. And someone will say, well, we repealed the assault weapons ban. Yeah, that's not really what I'm talking about. And there are people who will perpetrate this fiction that a gun dealer at his shop has to do background checks, but at a gun show he doesn't. That's not the case and never has been. We see lots more gun laws now than we had even in the last few years. For example, in the state in which I reside, a licensed gun dealer is required to do background checks, regardless of where he is. But as a citizen, I can't do it anymore, I was legally allowed to sell guns to other citizens. The only restriction I had was that I can't knowingly sell a gun to someone who can't legally possess it, like a kid or a convicted felon. I'm not required to ask, but if I know that he can't legally possess one, I can't sell it to him. About 5 years ago, we changed that. So now if I want to sell one of my guns to another citizen, we have to go to a gun dealer and he does the transfer and does your fingerprints and background check. Guns keep getting harder to get pretty much every day. And the assertion that these days they're so easy to get, as in easier than they used to be, is just not true. And for anybody who wants to perpetrate the fiction that anyone can just order a gun online and there's no background check and it's shipped right to you, I would ask you, please get online and buy one and see how that works out for you. And if you want to buy a muzzle-loading rifle or a firearm that's over 120 some years old, that might work, but you're not going to get this shipped right to your house. If you do, someone's already broken several laws. Now, another part of this fiction is that these days, there are so many semi-autos out there. These days, anyone can buy an AR or an AK. And the implication is that to do a mass shooting, you really have to have a firearm that is semi-auto, detachable box magazines with a fairly high magazine capacity. And you're not really going to be able to do very much of a mass shooting with your old cowboy single-action revolver. Okay. And mass shootings are occurring more now because AR platforms, AK platforms, all the different semi-auto rifles with detachable box magazines that will hold 20, 30, 40 rounds, those are available now. Semi-auto pistols with double-stack high-capacity magazines are available now, as were back in the 1970s, 60s, 50s, 40s, that firearms like that weren't available. You couldn't get firearms adequate to the task of doing a mass shooting, at least not much of one. And so people will say that, well, mass shootings occurred far less then than they do now because these days, in addition to guns being so easy to get, these days anyone can get a gun adequate to the task, and before you couldn't. That is an absolute fiction, which brings me to the demonstration portion of today's presentation. Let's take a look. This is a Colt government model, one of the many different versions of a 1911 platform. Let me show you a close-up of how this pistol works. This pistol utilizes a detachable box magazine, what some people will erroneously call a clip. You put the magazine in the magazine well, which is in the grip of the pistol. At this point, if I were to cock the hammer and pull the trigger, it would not go off because I have not put a round in the firing chamber. To do that, I'll pull back the spring-loaded slide, let it go, chambering around, and cocking the hammer. At this point, I'll engage the safety and put the pistol in my holster. To shoot the pistol, I'll take it out of my holster, disengage the safety, and pull the trigger. You can see that when I do that, it fires, and this action cycles so quickly it's almost undiscernible with the unaided eye. Each time I pull the trigger,
it will fire, eject the empty casing, chamber a live round, and cock the hammer again. And when I finish firing, I'll re-engage the safety and put it back in the holster. Now I have the pistol loaded with only 2 rounds. A feature that this pistol has, which is common to auto-loading pistols, is that when you fire the last shot, the slide will lock back. You can see that the slide is locked back. So to reload, I'll hit my mag release button, drop that magazine, put a new magazine in, hit the slide release, and I'm ready to go again. You can see how quickly pistols like this can be reloaded. Now, what some people will do is, instead of firing that last shot so the slide locks back, they'll count their rounds, fire till the magazine is empty, and leave that round in the chamber. So when they go to reload, they'll drop the empty magazine, put in a new magazine, and you don't have to hit slide release because there's already a round in the chamber. You have pre-primed the pump, as it were. And that allows you to reload, skipping that step and shooting that much faster. The Model 1911 is an old-school auto-loading pistol, and there's a lot of differences between this and more modern designs like this Beretta 92FS. And the first thing I want to point out is that a model number does not necessarily coincide with a patent date. This Model 92FS was not introduced in the year 92 AD, nor was it introduced in 1992. These have been around since the 80s. However, the 1911, that does coincide with a patent date. Now, a major difference between these two, as it pertains to people perpetrating the idea that modern guns with their greater magazine capacity are up to the task of mass shootings, well, these guns were not up to the task. Therefore, with these now available, there are more mass shootings. When this was the cutting edge of technology, there weren't. There is, along those lines, a major difference between these two pistols. This has what's called a single stack mag, while this has what's called a double stack mag. Let's take a close-up look at the difference between the two designs. On your left is the 1911 magazine, on your right is the 92FS magazine, and you can see that they're very similar in length. However, when we turn them this way, you can see that the 1911 magazine is much narrower than the 92FS magazine. Why? Because the 1911 magazine has all the rounds stacked one on top of each other. It's single stacked. As where the Beretta magazine, although it tapers down to single stack at the top, makes it easier feeding into the firing chamber, from there, these become staggered. So if you were to look at the fronts of the projectiles, your 1911 magazine would look like this, your Beretta magazine would have them double stacked. And what that allows you to do is have more rounds in a magazine that, although wider, isn't necessarily any longer. In this case, 15 rounds as opposed to 9. Now, there's something I need to clarify. A moment ago, I said that my 1911 has a 9-shot magazine. I know that'll raise some eyebrows. 1911 platform pistols are available in a variety of calibers. By far the most popular is 45 ACP. And when these were introduced, your old school guns in the 1920s, 1940s, 1960s, if they were caliber 45 ACP, almost exclusively had 7-shot magazines. Today, when you buy this in caliber 45 ACP, it's very common that it will have an 8-shot magazine. However, mine's not a 45, it's caliber 38 super automatic. The cartridges are smaller in diameter than the 45, so the magazine can hold more of them. And caliber 38 Super Auto and the 9-shot magazine have been available in this platform of pistol since circa 1928. It's an old school gun. But just how fast and accurately can I put shots on target with this pistol? I've got 2 targets set up at 10 yards, and I'll shoot them left, right, left, right. It wouldn't be realistic if I shot every shot at the same target. And I'll shoot as fast as I think I can hit, and we'll see how I do. Now, did you see that really big magazine I was using? It's an extended magazine, and it has a capacity of 17 rounds. The idea of high-capacity magazines is hardly something new. These are readily available, and as far as I can tell by any research I've done, magazines like this have been around since 1930 or before. Now, let's take a look at the target. And here's our group on our left target. Here's our group on our right target. Now, these groups are not stellar, but with this pistol at that distance, trying to shoot that fast in the hands of the average shooter, I'm going to say that the level of accuracy I achieved is more than adequate to today's subject matter. And remember, this is a model 1911. If you wanted it in caliber 45 ACP, it's been commercially available since circa 1912. This particular pistol was manufactured in 2011. However, except for an internal safety system that makes it a little more drop safe, this pistol in caliber 38 Super Auto with this 17-shot magazine is basically identical to something that you could have bought in 1930. Accurate, powerful, reliable, high-capacity auto-loading pistols are nothing new. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about a different design of firearm, the AR-15. And yes, this has stamped right on it, Colt AR-15A2. And the main things I want to discuss are, what does AR-15 mean? And why do we use terms like AR design, AR style, AR platform? Okay, in explaining this, please remember there's different versions of every story. And our story goes back to a company that called themselves Armalite, and they made firearms. And their firearms had model numbers. So there was a Model 1, a Model 2. You can see where this is going. However, when they got up to 15, that was not necessarily progressive designs of the same platform. Some of their firearms were very different. So AR-15 just means the 15th design that they had. And here's where there's different versions of the story. Some people will say that AR means Armalite rifle. Some people will say that the word Armalite, the first two letters are AR, and so AR just stands for Armalite. There are some differences of opinion on that, depending on which source you read. But one thing I can tell you is that AR does not stand for auto-loading rifle. It does not stand for automatic rifle, and it most certainly does not stand for assault rifle. Okay, but why do we have to call things a platform? All right. Armalite Corporation sold the patent to the AR-15 to Colt Corporation. And so only Colt could manufacture these firearms, but Colt kept the designation AR-15. Well, that patent ran out like patents do. And so now lots of different companies are making AR design firearms. However, AR-15 is still a registered trademark of the Colt Corporation. So the other companies, they call their rifles all kinds of things, but they can't call them an AR-15. And so when you hear on the news things like the bedwetter who shot up the school in Uvalde had an AR design or an AR platform, you can't say it was an AR-15 because it wasn't. That's a registered trademark of the Colt Corporation. Okay, now that we've got that to some degree cleared up, let's go back to our targets and see how fast and accurately I can shoot this. I have two new targets set up, and this time I'll shoot them from 20 yards. And again, I'll shoot left, right, as fast as I think I can hit. And although today I'll be using magazines of 25 rounds, 30-shot magazines are really considered the standard. Also, I'll only shoot one magazine. I think that'll be enough to make the point. And you can see it's very easy to reload quickly. Now let's take a look at our targets. And here's our shots on our left target and our shots on our right target.
So the AR-15, accurate, reliable, reasonably powerful, semi-auto, high-capacity magazine. But the statement that people make, where they're trying to perpetrate the notion that mass shootings occur more now than they did back then, because AR-15s are so easy to get these days, and they weren't easy to get back then. Okay, there's actually a little bit of truth to that. Although the AR-15 rifle, semi-auto, commercially available firearm, has been on the market for over 50 years, when you start getting back there around the 1970s, they were, by the standards of the time, very expensive. And when you allow for inflation, they were a whole lot more expensive then than they are now, at least in my experience and according to the research that I've been able to do. So specifically, AR platform rifles are more affordable, more available now than they were 50 years ago. However, there's a deeper implication to the statement that ARs are so easy to get these days. It implies that rifles that were accurate, reliable, reasonably powerful, semi-auto, high-capacity magazines of any type weren't available back then. Let me show you another rifle. This is an M1 carbine, and I've demonstrated this rifle before. These rifles have been made by many different companies. This particular one was made by a company called Inland. And this rifle, I don't mean this design, I mean this individual rifle that you're looking at right now, was manufactured circa 1942. It's about 80 years old. These rifles were issued in large numbers during the Second World War, and after the Second World War, some of them were dumped on the commercial market. Even more so after the Korean conflict. I have been contacted by a high number of people who've told me nostalgic tales about how when they were teenagers in the 1950s or 1960s, prior to the Gun Control Act of 1968, that they mail-ordered M1 carbines. No age check, no background check, mail-ordered, just mailed it right to your house. And people tell me that they paid reasonably low prices, like $40. At that time, the M1 carbine was the original dime a dozen rifle. Now let's take this to our targets and see how well it performs. I have two new targets set up, and again, I'll shoot from 20 yards, and again, I'll shoot left, right, as fast as I think I can hit. Now, it's important to note that originally M1 carbines were equipped with 15-shot magazines. Well, today I'm going to be using magazines loaded with 25 rounds. However, 30-shot magazines really are the standard, and 30-shot magazines have been around since circa 1950. So let's see how I do with this.
I didn't know there was that big of a magazine. I almost got flipped. It's flipped. I don't know why. That's good here.
Now, you may have noticed I had two malfunctions. However, they were easily and quickly cleared. Now let's take a close-up look at the targets. Here's our group on the left and our group on the right. So the results. Accuracy, certainly sufficient to the task. Reliability, I had two malfunctions. But I do have to say that that's not the results I typically get with this rifle. That was an anomaly. And even if I did have two malfunctions, they were very quickly and easily cleared. Reasonably powerful, semi-automatic, high-capacity magazines. And remember, this rifle is 80 years old. These features in a firearm, again, are nothing new. Now, that demonstration may or may not have been interesting, but what was the point? Okay, remember we were discussing Why is it so difficult to get a straight answer to the question,
I think it
what causes
is.
mass shootings? And I talked
These
about 4 barriers to
pills,
effective
they're like
communication.
powerful pills.
The first one
I
being
think there's side effects
people's
with it, eh?
maniacal need to debate semantics over substance, to debate minutia, and to argue with whom they perceive to be the opposition, even when the opposition says something with which they agree. And I used the example, we want there to be fewer mass shootings, and there's always someone who will say, no, we don't, we want there to be none. None would be fewer than what we have now, so we agree on that point, but you feel this maniacal need to argue, to debate semantics over substance, and argue about minutia, and argue with me, even when I said something with which you agree. It's a terrible barrier to effective communication, and it slows down the whole process. Now, the second one was the deniers. People who like to say that Sandy Hook didn't happen. There's already people saying that Uvalde didn't happen. When people do that, we have to stop the meaningful discussion and refute that fiction. And it delays some kind of solution. And when you delay, you end up with more mass shootings, more people being killed, and more blood on the hands of those people who are doing that denying or perpetrating that fiction. Now, the third one was kind of the opposite. When people pad the statistics and try to make it look like there's more mass shootings than there are, okay, again, we have to delay the discussion and refute that fiction. And when you perpetrate fictions like that and pad your statistics, then you lose all credibility and you hurt the people you were seeking to help. And the fourth one, and that's where our demonstration comes in, is the people who perpetrate the notion that we're having more mass shootings now than we did back then because guns are so much easier to get these days than they were back then. Or the other fiction, we're having more shootings now than we used to because guns adequate to the task, as in accurate, reliable, reasonably powerful, semi-auto, high-capacity magazine, that these guns exist now and they didn't exist back then. Okay, and our demonstration clearly showed that that is just not true. This particular fiction that guns exist now and guns adequate to the task didn't exist back then, and that guns are easier to get now than they were back then, is, in my opinion, the most destructive of the 4 barriers to effective communication, because just about any time anyone brings up the question, why are these mass shootings occur? Someone will immediately say, because guns are so easy to get. Okay, when you do that, it always turns into a debate about gun control when it really shouldn't be. When you do that, you're perpetrating a fiction. And instead of having a meaningful dialogue, we all have to stop and refute your fiction. There are people who will perpetrate the myth that because we have the internet, that you can just get online, order any kind of firearm, and it'll be delivered right to your house. Okay, if you think that's the case, take a look at this. This is a Wasser 1063. It's an AK platform. Get online, try to have one of these shipped right to your house. See how that works out for you. You're going to find that you pretty much can't do that. And if you do get one shipped right to your house, then you're either a licensed gun dealer or somebody's already broken several laws. The idea that guns are easier to get than they used to be is just fiction. And people who talk about things on the internet,
That's interesting.
they've never really done it.
I think guns actually work.
Sometimes when people perpetrate that myth, they are doing it through willful dishonesty. And sometimes they're doing it through the naivety of having believed someone who was perpetrating an intentional fiction.
I think it's a very complex issue.
I could talk all day about things like when I was a kid, and I mean a kid, going to gun shows with my dad. And you would see so much cash and so many guns, trading hands back and forth. Somebody would be down at this end of the gun show and he'd buy a gun for $100 and he's carrying it along with him. By the time he gets to the other end of the show, someone offers him $125 for it. Okay, so he sells it perfectly legal at the time.
I don't know. It's a tough
In the state in which I reside,
answer.
that is no longer the case and hasn't been in a long time. There are as far as I know, still a few states left in the United States where individual citizens can sell a gun to another individual citizen without a background check. And I can't quote you chapter and verse of every law in every jurisdiction in the United States. But as far as I know, there are still a few places where you can do that. But even at that, you still can't ship guns through the mail.
Show in Texas.
And even in those few places where you can
Canada,
still
we have really
do that, that does not represent guns having become easier to get. That represents that in that one place, guns have not gotten as much more difficult to get as they have in other places. In the 22 years since the turn of the century, compared to the 22 years prior to the turn of the century, so going back to 1978, if you think that in that 22-year period, guns have gotten easier to get than they were in the 22-year prior to that, you're absolutely wrong. And you are either speaking out of complete ignorance or you're intentionally perpetrating a falsehood. And when you perpetrate that falsehood, we have to take time away from the meaningful discussion to refute your falsehood. And it delays any kind of implementation of any kind of real solution. And when you delay that because of your fiction, then more mass shootings occur, more people are going to get killed, and some of that blood is on your hands.
Some people won't
When you
hear
perpetrate the
refute
fiction
too, right?
that guns adequate to
If
the
you're spreading
task
falsehoods,
are available
some of that
today, and they weren't available a
will
long time ago,
stay, and people will still believe the falsehood.
we now see that that's
just because
complete
the
fiction.
refuted
And when you
statements
perpetrate that,
don't
either through
seem
naivety
as
or through
much as
willful dishonesty,
falsehoods sometimes.
we have to stop the discussion, do a demonstration like I did, refute your fiction, and therefore any implementation of any real solution is delayed. With that delay, more mass shootings occur, more people are going to die, and more blood is on your...
Okay, I'm gonna do this. Okay, I have to carry both these cameras. Unplug this. Okay, I have to be so very careful. Okay. How am I gonna do this? This is the backup. At least I have a backup for all this footage. So I don't know. It's like I almost unplugged my camera. Holy fuck, man! I have to pee. How am I gonna do this, eh? Oh man, I almost lost my camera. Okay, I have, this is like, the camera is wrapped around this cord. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it back here. Oh, backup camera. Okay, fuck, I waited too long. Go pee. I was holding it. I shouldn't have held it. Fucking turn it on, man. Holy fuck. Okay, as long as my hands aren't anywhere near my head, we're good. I'm gonna no hands it. Okay, I'm gonna no hands it. Okay. I guess I don't really have to, eh? Like, let's pee. My face is here. You know what? We'll pee in this cup too. Why not, right? I'm gonna fill up the cup. Random curl. Sorry, I didn't mean like. I didn't realize those antidepressants, they actually do have side effects. I have to be so very careful. Kind of wash my hands. This is like kind of an unofficial pee test. I didn't use the same like super like okay, I have to get a pee tester kit. Oh fuck. Keep this over here. I also need to get some water. I want all my water to be right from the tap. Hang on, I gotta put down the drug test kit. I gotta figure out how to carry my water. We good? Water. A little bit tough. I just want to make sure all my water. Just gonna drink a bunch. Do the next couple hours. Okay, and I'll test the pee. Let's see it. That's not really super important that you see this one, but I might as well try, right? Why not? Just the most important thing is I have my face. So I feel like I probably shouldn't even be doing this. I should be just focusing on one thing at a time. But I don't want, it just makes more of a chance that I can accidentally have my face off the camera. Hour and 20. So we're at hour and 20 minutes since my last, it's like the camera turned off when I went to share screen. Okay, this is looking good though. So this is looking great. Yep, I passed. I guess what I'll do is I'll show the GoPro. I think it's a little bit difficult to see on GoPro. You can actually kind of see it. There we go. See? I'm still on camera, right? Okay. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like as long as I guess both my hands are on camera, that's kind of the same thing. Unless I'm like eating like some sort of masking agent out of the air. I'll try and put it on the camera But I want to have my face in here too. So I don't know. We'll just like kind of go like this. The thing is, it's this camera. You can't really see it on this camera unless I were to. That's my stomach. Okay, I don't know. I'll just put this here. But I showed the GoPro. So, but anyways, it's unofficial. It was a good result. Let's put it that way.